And Season 3 time! Rewatching Season 3 again, especially in conjunction with Seasons 1 and 2, it's very impressive just how much more polished the show is as a whole. I mean, in terms of production values, the writing, the voice acting, the colors, it really feels like Season 3 was the season where they quote-unquote got it down perfectly. And I firmly believe in general that the quality of the episodes in Season 3 overall really reflect that, as I hope to demonstrate in this part of the retrospective. Season 3, at least up to this point in the show's run, ended up being the most ambitious season of the show's run. It really did a great job of, in my opinion, showcasing just how versatile the formula actually is. While they really don't necessarily stray away from the core elements of the formula, what they add in, take out, and change in certain episodes really showcase just how good the writing is overall. And shaking up the status quo, even in just minor bits, really felt like the theme of Season 3. Firstly, we got to see Candace and Jeremy actually act like they were in a relationship. I know this is a small thing, but I really appreciate that the show actually got them together in Season 2 and didn't prolong that will they won't they thing like they did with Phineas and Isabella, but whatever. And we got to see bits and pieces of them actually acting like a couple and how that dynamic affected their friend circle, or at least on Candace's side. The episode Canderemy really did demonstrate just how much Stacy missed having Candace around, as the episode implied that Candace was basically spending a lot of time with Jeremy now that they were officially together. The only thing that's unfortunate about this plot twist is that it's coming in an episode that I am really not a fan of, but I'll circle back to this in a bit. We don't get a ton of exclusive focus on Jeremy and Candace acting as a couple in this season, but the moments that we do get I really enjoy and I think are really sweet. Personally, my favorite, and also the funniest in my opinion, come in the episode A Real Boy. Long story short, Candace tries to hypnotize herself so that she doesn't focus on busting Phineas and Ferb while on a date with Jeremy, which ends up blowing up in her face in a way where she outright abandons him in the park just to go bust them, and then this happens.
Sorry, Jeremy, I gotta bust my brother!
That's my girl.
I have several questions.
Okay, look, they never outright said it or even hinted at it, but if it turned out that Candace busting the boys was some kind of fetish for Jeremy, it would not remotely surprise me in the slightest. And look, no judgment from me. You like what you like, I just don't understand. There's another nice set of interactions between Candace and Jeremy in another episode called My Fair Goalie. I'll circle back to this one later because it is a 22-minute episode. Long story short, after Candace becomes terrified that Jeremy's going to stop liking her in favor of one of Ferb's extended cousins named Eliza, she seeks out Eliza's help in order to become more prim and proper so that Jeremy will in turn continue to like her, where she has to learn the painfully predictable lesson that Jeremy already likes her for who she is. I refer you to my aforementioned possible fetish comments.
Turns out Jeremy liked me how I was before. Hey, you just earned your adore patch.
Then there's the episode The Great Indoors, where Candace sends herself into a frenzy trying to figure out exactly what it is about her that Jeremy likes so much. A question that I too have because we never get an answer. It's the episode's joke, but I really would have liked to know because as much as I joke about it, their relationship is honestly really nice. It also takes up a lot of Candace's time apparently, as Canderemy, yes, that is the actual name of the episode, shows that at least early on in their relationship, Candace dedicated almost all of her non-busting time to Jeremy, meaning that Stacy herself felt very left out, meaning that her proclamation of being the third wheel all the way back in the Balgitos ended up being correct. And literally the only thing stopping her from completely separating herself from Jeremy for a day was Dr. Doofenshmirtz's Errantonator. I'll circle back to this episode later on, because this is one of the few episodes I don't really like. Which is funny too, because this episode doesn't even have my least favorite storyline involving Jeremy and Candace's relationship. That dishonor goes to the Where's Perry two-parter, where they do that dumb assery misunderstanding trope that convinces Candace that Jeremy wants to break up with her, which in turn leads to her desiring to live in the wilderness with the monkeys. I think that's a little bit extreme, Candace. There is at least a nice resolution to that plot line in part 2, but I don't really care for the fact that they did it in the first place. I just really do not like that trope anymore. Let couples be happy together, or at least if you're going to add some drama, actually add some drama. But this isn't a show that's going to add that kind of drama, and that's fine. But yeah, I don't like that plotline for the Canderemy relationship. In terms of characters, we have another overarching plot for the season, and that would be Vanessa and her relationships. With Doof, yes, and I'll get to that, but also with various boys. For example, her relationship with Johnny. For those that don't recall, and it's okay if you don't because he's such a nothing character, honestly, Johnny is Vanessa's first boyfriend seen on screen, as established in the episode Dude, We're Getting the Band Back Together as a boy she was crushing on. for some reason. He gets one semi-major appearance in Season 2 in the episode Brain Drain, which I didn't really talk about because it's not really noteworthy.
Well, I'll be honest, I don't really understand, but I fell down this hill. Now I got glue on my hands and...
Okay, besides that, because that is fucking outstanding. But then he doesn't have a really semi-major appearance until the Season 3 episode Skiddly Whiffers, where he's just there. Vanessa's going to this camp-out thing with her friend circle, and Johnny's just there, and the episode's not even really about him anyway. This culminates, I guess, in the episode Minor Monogram, where Vanessa breaks up with him over the phone, and he's off screen. Is this worse than what happened with Kelly and Marco in Star vs. the Forces of Evil? I mean, at least here, Vanessa was actually seen on screen breaking up with Johnny over the phone. Oh, and it was also because Johnny decided that video games were more important than Vanessa, because he's kind of a loser. But, like, you can also argue that this is actually worse, because this is Season 3, and they had, like, 2 major appearances on screen after they first got together. And keep in mind, that's about the span of 150 some odd episodes, whereas Marco and Kelly had sort of a slow burn for a full season, then got together for only a couple of episodes, and then their breakup was actually off screen. I don't know, and honestly, I don't give a shit. What's really important is that after the breakup and after an encounter with one of Doofenshmirtz's, proteges, Vanessa finds herself taking a liking to Major Monogram's son, Monty. This would lead to the episode Sipping with the Enemy, where they run into each other at a coffee shop and have a little coffee shop date, and it's actually really nice. I like it. The only issue there is that Doofenshmirtz and Perry are also there. Doofenshmirtz is doing his evil thing, and Perry is trying to stop him, but also acts as a middleman, so Doofenshmirtz doesn't notice that Vanessa is on a date with his mortal enemy's son. And actually, that raises a question that I don't think was ever answered. How does Doofenshmirtz know that Monogram has a son? How does he know that Monty is his son? Like, I imagine at this point in the show and the timeline, they've been enemies for a long time, so that he would have this information. I'm just curious as to how he obtained it, because that would be a pretty funny story in my opinion. Now, while I do like this development for them in general, we really don't get a ton of it until Season 4. And like I said earlier, the payoff really isn't as good as I would have liked it to be, but I'll get to that when I get to Season 4. Then, of course, there's the elephant in the room being Isabella and Phineas's relationship. See, this is where things kind of get funny for me. I firmly stand by my belief that by Season 3, the dynamic between them was starting to get old. You know, with Phineas being completely oblivious and stupid to Isabella's very obvious hints, while Isabella remains way too cowardly to just come out and say it with a straight face. But with all of that said, outside of a couple of exceptions, Seasons 3 and 4 have some of my favorite interactions with them. It definitely feels a lot more earnest and sincere between the two of them, and that's saying something because it already was the case with them. And it's not like there are some big sort of gesture. Why do I keep saying jester? And it's not like they're big, larger-than-life gestures anyway. They're very small, humble, adorable moments and interactions between the two of them that really do showcase why they're wonderful. Like when they briefly share that board space in Skiddly Whiffers, or when Isabella manages to get into Phineas's hot air balloon in Last Train to Bustville, although that one borders on creepy a little bit, let's not be lying. And some of them are just flat-out hilarious without really aiming to be. Like when Isabella accidentally grabs Ferb's hand instead of Phineas's hand in When Worlds Collide, or this hilariously adorable exchange in the Halloween episode.
Nice fairy princess costume. Where'd you get it?
Actually, I'm not wearing a costume.
Oh, okay.
Are you stupid or something?
Like, I don't know what's funnier, Phineas's face here or Isabella's face here. Once again, any movement in the will they, won't they storyline between Isabella and Phineas is marginal at best. The biggest movement we get in this department is the episode Meepless in Seattle. Like its predecessor, cuteness is a very important story element, specifically Isabella's cuteness. And hey, Phineas does actually properly acknowledge Isabella's cuteness in the most Phineas way possible.
So what you're saying is, you think I'm cute?
It's a scientific fact.
And look here, she looks offended by that. Don't roll your eyes at us, you diva. It's funny too, because this is actually the most positive growth that they get in their relationship for this season. The worst I'd probably give to Canderemy. Isabella actually tries to get alone time with Phineas for once. A novel concept, yes. But thanks to shenanigans, courtesy of Candace being Candace and Doofenshmirtz being Doofenshmirtz, it ends like this.
Oh, my.
Absolutely not.
Why did the universe shit on Isabella so much? I mean, all she wanted was some crumb cake. Not sorry. As jaw-droppingly hilarious as this show is, and rightfully so is, it's also the character-driven stuff that really interests me and grabs my attention. And there is a fair amount of it in Season 3. I'll start with Buford, just because. He has a lot of good appearances in Season 3, but I think my favorite is the episode Buford Confidential. In that episode, we learn that there is a French division of the Fireside Girls. Wait, is this a Girl Scout troop or a cult? I'll believe either. And we learn that Buford briefly gallivanted with one of them in Paris, and in that regard, I am canonically setting their meeting during the events of Summer Belongs to You. Why?
I don't know, because I'm fucking stupid?
It's a side of Buford that we're not really used to seeing. And I don't mean the part about him being in love, because as we see after the movie, the show basically just puts him in a trance with Candace every chance they get. I'm talking about him basically being on the back foot of everything, being caught off guard, when usually he puts on a front of not being able to be spooked by anything aside from Susie. It's a nice change of pace, although spoilers! We never see any of the girls introduced in this episode ever again, which is honestly a bummer. It would have been nice if this dynamic had poked its head around a few more times throughout the series. Although it might have been a little bit awkward and hard to make funny considering the girl admits she was only
vaguely interested in a brute such as you.
What does that even mean?
Ah, so that's the problem. She only knows him for his Season 1 personality, not for his post-Season 1 and objectively better, more complicated personality. The one that makes him one of the best characters in the entire show, fight me. Oh, there's also the funny episode Bully Bromance Breakup. So after Baljeet declares that he's no longer Buford's nerd, because I guess that's a part of the bully code or something, seriously, missed opportunity. Buford ends up forming a temporary friendship with Doofenshmirtz of all people. A really funny idea that really doesn't get much done with. Sure, they set up machinations for a potential evil scheme between the two of them, but it doesn't really get to go anywhere. It feels like a setup with no payoff, which honestly sucks, but their funny interactions with themselves and each other and the world around them kind of make up for it. As for Baljeet, well, now that he's finally free to live his own life in his own words, seriously, what the hell's the nature of their relationship? He enlists Phineas and Ferb's help so he can climb Mount Danville.
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
I'm sorry, but this feels completely out of left field. Baljeet meshes about as well with physical exercise as chocolate does with pizza. And then even weirder is the stipulation that they can't use any gadgetry or whatever. I mean, this is Phineas and Ferb. Building gigantic gadgets is kind of their thing. Like, literally, since near the end of the episode, Phineas literally almost snaps when he's finally allowed to actually build something, which... yeah, Phineas, that's not healthy.
Please seek some counseling.
Like, I don't dislike this story, it's funny, it's just very bizarre. Like, if anything, Buford should have been in this position. Like, he's the physical activity guy of the group. Except I don't think Baljeet would have meshed nearly as well with Doofenshmirtz as Buford did, so I can understand why they made this choice. Also, their breakup song is fucking hilarious.
There's a nerd-shaped hole, a bully-sized hole, a big honking hole in my heart.
Play it. Also, something I want to mention real quick. Bully Bromance Breakup might be one of the only episodes in the entire series where Candace does not appear at all. This means that there is no busting subplot in this episode. Like I said last time, that doesn't happen very often in this series, but it does prove that every episode doesn't necessarily need a busting component in order to be good. Also, I just thought of something. So this episode establishes that Phineas goes through basically withdrawal if he's not given permission to build anything. Is it specifically because Baljeet's not a family member? Because he didn't get permission in Thaddeus and Thor just before that episode turned into garbage. Does he respect Candace more as an authority figure? It's funny to me because this idea never comes back again. I'm just saying there's recurring gag potential with this idea here. Again, Buford doesn't get a lot of focus episodes in this season, but the time that he does get on screen is, once again, very memorable. He has a fantastic personality that just captures your attention every time he's on screen, for better or for worse. Since this episode also features Baljeet, I guess I'll move on to him next. In addition to his enjoyable yet bizarre focus in Bully Bromance Breakup, there's also the episode Cranius Maximus, a slightly weaker Baljeet-focused episode, but still very entertaining on its own. Basically, Baljeet has his own version of a midlife crisis where he thinks summer vacation is making him lose his mental edge, and his quest for infinite knowledge temporarily turns him evil and insane. While it's definitely not one of my favorite episodes, and while I'm not really a huge fan of overly smug, smarmy Baljeet here, I really do like the ingenuity we have. The kids being placed in a situation where they have to face off against one of their own, and basically have to outwit literally the smartest person in the universe not named Sheldon Cooper.
Since I am Sheldon Cooper, you will be my seaman. No, that's not a good name.
And then having to save him and the entire world from his own hubris. It is good stuff, even if it's not amazing. Although I do have to ask, why are you worried about summer vacation? You've literally never stopped schooling anyway. Were you not literally doing a school project for a teacher earlier this summer? I.e. Season 1. There's also Tour de Ferb, where it's inexplicably established that Baljeet comes from a long line of bicycle race losers that keep getting attacked by tigers. What the hell is with this show? I just don't understand. Why tigers? Why a secret agent platypus? Why any of this? But he gets inspired to race in a Phineas and Ferb built bicycle race by Greg LeMond, whoever the hell that is. And then he ends up winning, because of course he does. Let's see, there's also lots of Lakas. I mean, there's not really a Baljeet or even a Buford-focused episode, but their duet together fucking slaps. I think that's it in terms of character-focused episodes for Baljeet. That's actually kind of wild. Let's do Isabella next. There's The Great Indoors, where her and her Fireside Girl troupe have to earn a patch even though it's raining outside, so Phineas and Ferb built this sunny biodome or something. Okay, look, it's not a lot, but honestly, it's really sweet how Phineas and Ferb went out of their way to make it stupidly easy for Isabella to earn the patch. Unfortunately, this episode is paired with Canderemy, an episode featuring Isabella significantly that I don't like very much. Honestly, the vibes are just off in this episode, all around. Even in the Doofenshmirtz plot, even though that is the best part of this episode. Lots of Lakas kind of focuses on her, but not really. More so it focuses on her grandmother. See, there's a potato shortage in Danville, and those are needed to make latkes, I guess. I don't really cook very much, I really should. So Phineas and Ferb step in to artificially create more. But after an incident with Buford being Buford.
Buford, you didn't put that chip in your mouth, did you? And if I did, would that be actionable?
You were literally too stupid to insult.
They have to futz around in order to fix the mess. It's a fine episode all around, but it's the duet between Buford and Baljeet that really wins everyone over, and rightly so. Okay, weirdly, I think that's it in terms of significant focus in episodes for Isabella. You know, I really think it says something that these characters are all memorable in their own way, despite not really getting that much specific focus on them. I'm not exactly sure what it says, but I know it says something. Irving? Well, there's What a Crock, who finds himself inadvertently teamed up with Candace for the majority of the episode. And by team up, I mean Candace is trying to steal his virtual scrapbook, which has evidence of all of Phineas and Ferb's inventions over the summer, but Irving wasn't born yesterday. I'm not entirely sure how I feel about this one, actually. See, on paper, putting these two together might make sense. Candace is desperate to gain evidence of the boy's antics in order to show Linda to prove she's not crazy, and Irving might have the biggest crush on Phineas of all the characters except for Isabella, and I'm only half joking with that. The episode was funny, their antics were fine, I just thought they could have been better, you know? And we don't really get a quote-unquote team-up episode with them again until Season 4, and it's in an entirely different context. So really, this potential was squandered. Kind of a shame, really. The potential is there. There's Moon Farm, I guess. While the rest of the kids are in space, breeding cows, I guess. Irving stays on Earth and acts as a middleman while Phineas relays some sort of lamb cobbler recipe to Candace, who wants to surprise Jeremy with a home-cooked dinner. It goes about as well as you think. Also, Irving tries to hit on Candace, and I don't know how, but they somehow made it more endearing when they made Buford the one who was infatuated with Candace. I have no idea how that happened. I also just want to briefly point out the funniest joke in the whole episode, and honestly, my favorite joke of this entire fucking season. I won't talk about it when I talk about Doof's part because this really isn't important for any storylines. Basically, he's trying to give himself a quote-unquote green thumb and learns for the first time what metaphors are.
I will finally have a green thumb! You know, not actually, metaphorically. I'll have a green... Oh, it's a metaphor!
Best line read of the entire season, and it's not close. Holy shit, is that really it for Irving too? Holy crap. You know, I know the show isn't about the characters themselves necessarily, but I could have sworn that there were more episodes that put more of a focus on a lot of these characters than there actually are in Season 3. Oh well. I mean, I guess I'll go to Candace next? Actually, to be fair, Candace does have her fair share of legitimate character exploration throughout this season. Aside from the episodes I've already talked about, The Great Indoors and Canderemy, we have Run Candace Run. Candace tends to overpromise, and also tends to be very forgetful, promising both to read books to young children with her mother for some reason, and also to do... something with Stacy. Once again, I have to ask, what the fuck was going on here? Oh yeah, she was also invited to Jeremy's family picnic, where she somehow ends up reuniting a long-lost family member with the family and gets accepted as an honorary Johnson or something, while also ripping her away from her lovely husband who literally didn't do anything wrong in this episode. So this does mean that Candace is technically a homewrecker now. There's also Last Train to Bustville, which in my opinion might be the most interesting Candace story of the season, if not necessarily the best or funniest. So basically through a combination of funny wordplay, selective hearing, and Candace being an all-around idiot, Candace actually decides to give up on busting her brothers. It lasts about 11 minutes.
Wow.
It's actually funny because the catalyst for this episode, a woman named Glinda, actually gets Candace to resume trying to bust her brothers through reverse psychology, I think. Yeah, she gave her speech about not giving up and Candace misheard it because she's a teenager, but then gives up on an important train mission which inspires Candace to do the opposite and try to get the trains to still keep going, which ultimately validates the original point that the woman was making in the beginning of the episode, that you should never give up no matter what you do, even though that literally pushed Candace to eliminate the single biggest stressor in her life.
I don't know, I've gone cross-eyed.
Yeah, I don't know, and honestly, it doesn't really matter. But this episode turned out to be a lot funnier and a lot more insightful than I remembered. There's Candace Disconnected, where she gets to be defeated by technology. You know, again. There's also the Curse of Candace in what I think is one of the funniest Candace plots of the entire season. Because she's a teenager, she somehow manages to convince herself that she's become a vampire. Well, I say that, but judging by the way she dies at the end of the episode, she might have been right. I really did not give Candace the love she richly deserved when this show was still airing. Oh well, that's the perils of being a teenager. Oh wait, I was 22 when the show ended. Never mind! If we're talking pure character exploration, I think the most interesting Candace episode this season is Monsters from the Id, where we basically get to see the amalgamation of Candace's inner mental workings. And it's just about as crazy as you would think it is. Like, I'm pretty sure it's not healthy for a 15-year-old teenage girl's id to be this fucking thing. Oh, and you want to know the reason why all of this actually happens? It's because Candace lost a gift that Jeremy gave her and couldn't remember what it looked like and wanted Phineas and Ferb's help to recreate it. Well, you know, actually, I'm wrong. It wasn't Jeremy's gift to her that she lost. It was his drain unclogger. My friend, if that's a drain unclogger, then I'm Green Lantern. Oh, by the way, this was the gift that Jeremy was going to give her. The drain unclogger looks better.
Why you booing me? I'm right.
I think Monster from the Id has the best and my personal favorite Candace story of the season, but if I had to pick the funniest, I would say Tri-State Treasure Boot of Secrets is the funniest. At a swap meet, Candace spots a rare and valuable Ducky Momo collectible. She doesn't get a ton of attention in this episode, but honestly I just find the entire concept to be absolutely freaking hilarious, and deserving of its own 11-minute time slot, instead of just relegated to 3 minutes in this 11-minute time slot. Let's move on to Vanessa. Her big thing in this season is breaking off her relationship with Johnny, which really wasn't a relationship because we saw him like twice in the series proper. And one of those times came in an episode last season I didn't even talk about, Brain Drain. And it happens with her on screen and him off screen. Still doesn't feel nearly as insulting as the Marco Kelly thing, but I've kicked that horse in the nuts enough times already. The breakup happens in the episode Minor Monogram, which also serves as the introduction to Major Monogram's son, Monty. And the end of the episode shows Vanessa showcasing an infatuation with Monty, something that would be explored in the episode Sipping with the Enemy, where they ultimately decided to try a relationship together. This gets a lot more play in Season 4, so I really don't have much else to add here, but as I said previously, I really do like their chemistry together. They play off of each other very nicely as foils, and I wish they had gotten even more screen time together. But I'll expand on that more in Season 4. In addition to those episodes, there's also Skiddly Whiffers. Vanessa's off on a camping trip with her friends and Johnny. This was before they broke up, by the way. And Doofenshmirtz once again struggles with the idea of Vanessa growing up into an adult.
Look at me, I'm 16 years old. 16!
That's practically an adult, but you still treat me like I'm a little kid.
I mentioned this a while back, and I still stand by it, but I feel like the slight disconnect between Doofenshmirtz's emotionally scarring backstories and the way he goes about raising Vanessa was a missed opportunity on the show's part. The most prominent example, in my opinion, is the birthdays. You establish in Season 1 that Doofenshmirtz had pretty shitty birthdays thanks to his upbringing, and as a result of that, he overcorrects for Vanessa and goes all out, even though she says she doesn't want that. The fact that the episode didn't make the connection between Doofenshmirtz's tragic upbringing and his desire to overcorrect for that was confusing to me in hindsight. Maybe the writers decided that in canon, Vanessa was already very much aware of Doofenshmirtz's tragic upbringing, but if that's the case, it makes her disdain for his efforts a little bit off-putting, actually. It's the same problem here, though I'll argue much less egregious. Because this you could just chalk up to general parental overprotection as opposed to a connection to his tragic backstory. Then again, his parents did make him become the family lawn gnome. It was also a thing in Season 2's Finding Mary MacGuffin, an episode that I kinda glossed over because of runtime. See, Lawrence sells to Doofenshmirtz Candace's Mary MacGuffin doll, for a fucking $1, I might add. And then we learn that Vanessa had a similar doll when she was a kid, and Doofenshmirtz had spent years searching for it, once again going the extra mile to compensate for his shitty upbringing. This is where Vanessa's opinion of her father starts to turn a little bit, for the better. And I do kinda wish it had carried over to episodes like Skiddly Whiffers, as opposed to only really starting to be a big thing in Season 4. She also has a bizarre role in the episode A Real Boy. Thanks to a staple misunderstanding, Vanessa seems to think Doofenshmirtz would rather have a son do his evil bidding, instead of a daughter. Except not really, because she had earbuds in the whole time, so that was a whole bunch of nothing. No, the funniest part, and arguably the most disturbing part, was Norm taking advantage of Doofenshmirtz's latest evil scheme blowing up in his face and trying to brainwash him into thinking that he was his actual biological son, and no, I'm not kidding. It was very weird. The Candace stuff was miles funnier, honestly. She had a few bit roles here and there in Season 3, but her primary contributions were relegated to just those few episodes. I suppose this is as good of a time as any to move on to Dr. Doofenshmirtz. So one aspect of his character that I really haven't been talking about is the emotionally scarring backstories. This is for a couple of reasons. The first is that I just keep forgetting, honest. I really don't want to make these episodes stupidly long, and I feel like I'm already pushing it. Another reason is that they're just so darn hilarious, both in concept and in execution, that it really wouldn't do it justice for me to just describe them or spoil them here. But there is another reason, and that reason is there's actually an episode this season that is exclusively focused on the backstories. That episode is, aptly titled, This Is Your Backstory. See, it's Doofenshmirtz's plan to use the repressed memories of his tragic upbringing to create evil energy or something I really don't know, and transform himself into a ginormous monster. Why do this? Hell if I know. This is the same guy that thought trash-talking a whale was a productive use of his time. The inner machinations of Dr. Doofenshmirtz are an enigma. This Is Your Backstory is definitely the most creative way I've seen the show use the backstory idea. It's also one of the funniest, if I'm being completely honest, which I'll definitely talk about once I start spotlighting the episodes proper, which will probably be now. Because character-wise, we're up to Phineas and Ferb, and considering that they only have one really major character exploration outing, I guess I'll start with that. I am, of course, talking about Phineas and Ferb the movie Across the Second Dimension. First and foremost, the movie is fantastic. It truly felt like yet another step forward for the franchise. The longest adventure to date, the biggest stakes to date, and of course Phineas and Ferb finally discovering that Perry is a secret agent. I still have to stand by my opinion though that Phineas was kind of out of line. Yes, I sympathize with his pain and suffering. He feels betrayed. He feels like he's been lied to by his own pet for who knows how long. Several years by this point actually, because the movie establishes that they got Perry as a pet when they were very, very young. The feeling of betrayal is understandable. But even with that in mind, Phineas was just overly harsh with Perry when he really had no justification to do so. Especially because Perry did actually make an effort to explain himself, and Phineas just blew him off.
Didn't he give you a pamphlet?
We threw it away. What do you mean, we?
Yeah, don't try to drag Ferb into this. This was your fuck-up, Phineas. You own it. Jokes aside, Across the Second Dimension is phenomenal. In addition to the Perry, Ferb, and Phineas dynamic, this film just offers a plethora of opportunities for future world building that the show never takes advantage of, but I digress. It's an alternate world where Doofenshmirtz is actually competent and also a ruthless dictator. Summer vacation is completely outlawed, and the Phineas and Ferb of this dimension have no idea what summer or even fun is. The kids and Candace of this dimension have all been indoctrinated into this resistance group. I'm sure there's a commentary about child soldiers here somewhere. And the Phineas and Ferb that we know are trying to get back to their home dimension while also grappling with the Perry revelation. Aside from the themes, the action scenes, the dialogue, the comedy, and even the music, they are all at the top of their game at this point in the run. Like, seriously, Summer, Where Do We Begin? Kick It Up a Notch, Robot Riot, Everything's Better with Perry, Brand New Reality, Brand New Best Friend, Mysterious Force, which didn't even make it into the final movie. These are genuinely some of the best songs that the show has ever produced. They are top-notch, no pun intended. Even Taking Care of Things, the last song before the end credits plays, is a pretty good song, although its origin is more interesting to me than the actual song itself. See, this song was originally written to be the theme for the Disney sitcom Pair of Kings, but that show ended up using a different song, so Dan and Swampy repurposed this song for this movie. It's honestly for the best. That show is too mid for this song anyway. Oh, and before I forget, this is also the first time Isabella gets to kiss her beloved, and then it's immediately undone by the memory erasing, because to not do so would be a violation of the Geneva Convention, and we don't want to do that. Yeah, the shipper in me was pretty mad about this. Still am, honestly. Another underappreciated aspect about this movie, in my opinion, is the references to past big ideas that we get in the climax. It feels like such a huge love letter to the people that have followed this show from the beginning to this point, and it is glorious. Even though I prefer watching Candace Against the Universe because of personal reasons, I can say that I don't think that movie really topped the scope and the stakes that this movie managed to create. So despite my preferences, I fully acknowledge that this is probably the better film, and it is still fantastic even all these years later. It truly felt like the culmination of all the hard work that the people behind the show and Dan and Swampy had put into this show, from the 13 plus years it took to just get someone to take a chance on it, to the 2+ seasons of fantastic content that we got as a result of it. Experiencing it firsthand as it was going was a real treat. But it's not like everything stopped here, too. Season 3 was most definitely a more experimental season than Seasons 1 and 2, with the different kinds of episodes and ideas that we got. To start off, we have what we call the time shift episodes. A small batch of episodes that had Phineas and Ferb and the characters in different time periods telling different stories, really embracing the cultures and the period of time that the episodes are set in. The first was Tri-Stone Area, set, well, during the Stone Age. Phineas and Ferb invent the wheel, and Doofenshmirtz tries to make his, cave not look so pathetic, I guess. Also, there's a caveman version of the song Gitchy Gitchy Goo, which, I'm just gonna be honest, is not as good as the original. I know it's not trying to be better, but yeah. It's a fun episode, all things considered, and I certainly don't think it's a bad episode. It's just not one that I would go back to a lot, especially from the group of time shift episodes we get. Then in Doof Dynasty, in ancient China, Princess Isabella is captured by Doofenshmirtz. So Phineas and Ferb and the rest of the friends all go to seek out this Master Perry guy who's been a recluse ever since an incident, in order to seek out his wisdom and or fighting skills on how to take down Doofenshmirtz and rescue Isabella. I'd say this role fits Perry perfectly, but unfortunately he's shown to be a union buster, so I hope he steps on a bunch of Lego bricks and cries like a little bitch. This episode is better than Tri-Stone Area, both for its atmosphere, the ancient Chinese aesthetic, the music, even the jokes themselves are just a lot funnier. It also helps that nobody speaks in caveman in this episode. Then we have Phineas and Ferb and the Temple of Whatchadoon. Get it? It's an Indiana Jones homage that sees Phineas and Ferb travel to Central Africa to help Isabella find her missing mother. Also, we have Candace playing the role of a journalist, which is funny to me since we just had Isabella play the role of a journalist in The Beak. Definitely a lot of fun and a lot of great laughs to be had. But the best time shift episode, in my opinion, is Excalibur. I mean Excalibur. In medieval times, Phineas and Ferb set out to find the legendary sword Excalibur so they can defeat the evil Maleficentschmerz. It's Doofenshmirtz. I'm just gonna call him Doofenshmirtz to simplify things. Actually, I think the best part about this episode is the framing device. See, Major Monogram is sick in bed. Clearly, we are in the end times. And Carl decides to read him a story to make him feel better because I guess now he's his dad or something. So do they just like role reverse from whatever the hell this was supposed to be in Season 1? This scene lives in my head rent-free. Excalibur is the only 22-minute episode of the time shift arc of episodes. The atmosphere, the aesthetics, the jokes, the dialogue, the action scenes, all of it are at their best in this episode. Especially the banter we get between Monogram and Carl. It's wholesome and also hilarious. There are so many hilarious gags in this episode. Candace getting tripped up over Phineas and Ferb's potions, the Monogram Carl banter, Buford and Baljeet being just the best parts of this episode, the troll bridge with Poofenplots. I didn't talk about her in this Season 2 video, did I?
No.
Yeah, of course I didn't. Alright, short detour. So, in Season 2, Phineas and Ferb had the episodes Bubble Boys and Isabella and the Temple of Sap. In the first episode, Phineas and Ferb created a bubble that everyone could pass through and travel around in the air inside of, while Perry worked to stop Dr. Doofenshmirtz from becoming a country superstar, because that's a thing for some reason. While Isabella and the Temple of Sap focused on the Fireside Girls getting the sap that Phineas needed to create the bubble. But the B-plot was not a Perry Doofenshmirtz plot, sort of. The episode established that Isabella's pet chihuahua Pinky is also an agent of Alka, because I guess every animal is an agent of Alka for some reason. Wait, so does that mean the Star-Nosed Mole from the episode At the Car Wash is also an Alka agent? Might as well be at this point. So anyway, Pinky is a secret agent, and his nemesis is the evil, nefarious Professor Poofenplots, who seeks to attain dominance by means of fashion or whatever. Yeah, she's basically a lamer version of Dr. Doofenshmirtz, which is hilarious because Dr. Doofenshmirtz is designed from the ground up to be lame. So while I did like the focus on Isabella and her Fireside Girl troop, I disliked that we also had to focus on Pinky and his nemesis Poofenplots. It just isn't the same. Fortunately, her appearance in this episode is terrific because it's literally the role she was born to play. A troll. Oh, I stand corrected. It's a troll that nobody takes seriously. Honey, I think you need to start taking some tips and lessons from the grumpy old troll that lives under the bridge.
I'm the grumpy old troll who lives under the bridge. Hey!
If I had a nickel for every time I ran into a cartoon troll that lived under a bridge that forced our characters to solve a riddle in order to get across, I would have 2 nickels. That's not a lot, but it's weird that it's happened twice, isn't it? Also, Poof and Plods has one more appearance next season, but we'll get to that. Excalifurb is most definitely the best time shift episode that we got this season. Honestly, it's kind of a shame that we never got more of these kinds of episodes. In addition to just being incredibly entertaining, it allows the show and its characters to step out of its comfort zone for just a little bit. Tell stories, tell jokes that they probably wouldn't be able to do under a normal episode. And with the added benefit of not having to worry about continuity or canon or any of that bullshit, so they have even more incentive to just go to town. Of course, that's not to say that we don't get interesting episodes in canon. Hell, there's one 11-minute episode that really sticks in my mind from this season, and that's The Remains of the Platypus. On the surface, it's actually a very standard episode. Phineas and Ferb build a cheese-themed amusement park, I think. Doofenshmirtz brainwashes Perry into thinking that he's his servant, and Carl gets trapped while trying to rescue Perry. But the gimmick for this episode is that the story is told backwards.
Say what?
You know, at least until like the last 2 minutes or so. Like, for real, it opens with Doofenshmirtz already on the precipice of victory, and every subsequent scene goes back a few seconds so we can play catch-up, so to speak. It's simply a creative way to tell the story, and I applaud that they tried to do something different, but honestly, on rewatch, I kind of find the gimmick a little annoying. It doesn't really provide much to the episode in terms of comedy, and honestly, the stories they tell aren't really big enough or ambitious enough to justify this sort of extra gimmick. Even still, it's really funny. And also, Monogram can't handle his cheese.
15 minutes later.
Wait! High five! Hey, don't leave me hanging!
He's gonna die.
Probably.
We also have a Phineas and Ferb Family Christmas, the second and final Christmas-themed episode of the series, and it's an episode specifically created to be paired with Phineas and Ferb Christmas Vacation. The boys put on a traditional holiday special, like the ones you would always see on TV. What's interesting about this episode is it doesn't actually perform an original song, technically. Rather, they're cover versions of famous Christmas songs, such as We Wish You a Merry Christmas, Let It Snow, and Good King Wenceslaus. I don't know actually how you say that. All of these and more were included on the Phineas and Ferb Holiday Favorites album, which was released in September of 2010. Which I just find hilarious because Christmas Vacation was released in December of 2009, and Family Christmas wasn't released until December of 2011. I'm just saying there was kind of a missed opportunity for synergy here. Oh, and Kelly Clarkson is here for some reason. I say for some reason because nobody will actually let her sing in this episode, which kind of seems like the in-joke that SpongeBob SquarePants' Atlantis SquarePants special was going for, but nobody had any self-awareness there. No, fucking seriously, they got David fucking Bowie to guest voice in Atlantis SquarePants, and nobody got him to sing a song, or even make a joke out of that. Oh, and of course, Doofenshmirtz, being the lovable dumbass that he is, seems to actually think that it really is Christmas time, and believes he's behind on Christmas shopping. So his evil nature of the episode revolves around that idea. So does this mean that this episode takes place after Christmas Vacation? Because he seems to be okay with embracing the idea that he doesn't hate Christmas anymore. Look, as a complimentary episode to Christmas Vacation, it's perfectly fine, it's serviceable, I like the music just fine. The album itself is a bop, and you absolutely should listen to it, at least once. It works for what it is. We also get a little bit more world building into Dr. Doofenshmirtz's side of things. Season 2 gave us a brief glimpse of the evil organization that Doofenshmirtz belongs to, Love Muffin. And need I remind you, he gave the organization that name. Season 3 gives us a little bit more, although not that much. The big one in this regard, though, is Bullseye. Love Muffin is having their first ever Supreme Leader elections, which really just begs the question of how long Love Muffin itself has actually been a thing. Lawrence, through no fault of his own, gets mixed up in the shenanigans, and thanks to typical Doofenshmirtz dumbassery, he somehow wins the election and becomes the new Supreme Leader.
We have term limits in Love Muffin, right? Nope.
Wait, if this is your first election, how do you know that you don't have term limits? Wait, who even formed Love Muffin in the first place? Also, apparently, if Lawrence had stayed evil and had not been snapped out of his evil trance by Phineas and Ferb randomly showing up into the plot, Perry would have had to be reassigned to a different family? What? I'm sorry, but it's starting to dawn on me that the ways in which Perry could lose his host family are so absurdly out of his control that it's not even fair. I hope his paycheck is worth it. Oh, who am I kidding? It's Monogram. Of course it's not.
Why you booing me? I'm right.
Oh, speaking of Doofenshmirtz, did you know that he decided to turn himself into a platypus this season? and not remotely as insufferable as when Rick turned himself into a pickle. I've heard of getting into the mind of your enemy, but this is kind of silly, though not nearly as silly as Buford having life-size molds of all of his friends.
Tell me again, why you have a life-size mold of Candace?
I got life-size molds of all my friends.
I'm not so sure how I feel about that.
Okay, first of all, Isabella, you would kill to have a life-size mold of Phineas in your room, so you can shut the fuck up. Secondly, Buford, you didn't actually answer Baljeet's question. Say, do you remember Robot Chicken and Mad TV? Those sketch comedy TV animated series that used to air on Cartoon Network? Well, Phineas and Ferb decided to take their shot at it with the episode Ferb TV. Basically just a collection of non-sequitur sketches in the course of an 11-minute time slot. None of these sketches really have anything to do with each other, they're just excuses to tell jokes that they think they probably couldn't tell in the regular continuity. It's fun, I like it fine, it's just not spectacular. And of course I'd be remiss if I neglected to mention the awesome episode that is Norm Unleashed, where Norm gets his true chance to shine while Doofenshmirtz is on jury duty. Wait, why would someone pick Doofenshmirtz for jury duty? And yeah, of course Norm would go with the practical solution of just using mass weaponry to defeat his enemies, but Doof appears to be allergic to practicality in the same way that corporations are allergic to giving their workers fair wages. Also, Norm's song fucking slaps.
Powers on your shopping list and use the elbow and the fist. Pummel them until they get the gist.
There's Delivery of Destiny that follows this character named Paul, who the show decided was important for this episode for some reason. And then, of course, Quietest Day Ever, where the kids try to keep themselves silent so Linda can take this... Actually, what the hell is she even doing in this episode? Oh, she's taking an online knitting test. For what reason exactly? What, will her knitting license be revoked if she fails? Oh, okay, never mind. Although I do have one, maybe stupid question to ask. So if Linda's request was to keep their noise levels at a minimum, why did Phineas and Ferb build ninja outfits? Why didn't they just build like a soundproof dome to play in or something? Like, I get the idea that ninjas are supposed to be stealthy and therefore quiet, but their voices could still travel. Linda could very clearly hear Candace's voice as she was trying to show her the outfit, so it technically fails the objective they were trying for. It doesn't really mean anything in the grand scheme of things, but this disconnect here is very funny to me. So I think it's time at this point to move on to the 22-minute episodes of the season to close the video out. Yes, aside from the movie, which doesn't technically count, Season 3 does not have any 44-minute episodes. Season 4, however, has a ton, but we'll get to those next time. Since I already brought up Excalibur with the time shift episodes, I'll talk about it very briefly here. It's a wonderful, fantastical experience, and some of the jokes in here are some of the best of the whole season. Pretty much everything about the high fantasy atmosphere really helps to make the episode just a brilliant experience. Although it loses points because it didn't let Carl be the hero in the end. Say, guess what? We have another birthday episode this season. This time, it's Phineas. It basically functions as a semi-pseudo clip show of sorts. While his friends and family are all working on a huge birthday surprise for Phineas, Candace is trying to stalk his friends so she can gather evidence to actually bust Phineas. You know, on his birthday. Because she made a deal with Satan or something, I don't fucking know. I remember thinking that this episode was a lot better when I watched it at first, all those years ago. I still like it fine, and I think the sentiment at the end with Candace and Phineas is wonderful. It's just that I remember this episode being a bigger thing than it actually was. Also, they do a joke at the end where they imply that Candace is actually a pretty bad sister, and despite my mixed feelings on Candace, that was a dick move. Also, what would a nickel even buy you in this day and age? Also, Isabella really needs to make new friends.
We'll be together forever, Isabella.
The magic of digital editing.
Please seek some counseling.
I also just fucking love how Candace was literally right there to watch the entire clip play out on Isabella's computer. And she literally had zero reaction or acknowledgement of it. Either she's super laser focused on the task at hand, or she's just used to Isabella's nonsense and just lets it slide.
Both is good.
Also, how did Isabella get footage of Phineas wearing his pajamas in his bed? I'm sorry, but I'm starting to think that Isabella is just the teeniest bit unhinged. The episode My Fair Goalie actually introduces us to more of Lawrence's extended family. While the younger kids play with Phineas and Ferb and their friends in a supercharged version of soccer, which everyone calls Football X7. Oh yeah, that's right, the British call it football. So wait, what do they call American football then? Just American football. Eliza tries to help Candace become more prim and proper after she goes through another period of self-doubt, and Lawrence and his brother Adrian engage in some various odd competitions. Then it's revealed that Lawrence has let his brother win every time because he's both a good brother and also kind of a pussy. And then finally he wins one in the end and seemingly puts Adrian's ego in his place. See, Adrian is the kind of character that I enjoy rooting to fail. Just egotistical enough to be likable in his own way, but not so overly egotistical that he disgusts and annoys me. I feel like this is what they were going for with Thaddeus and Thor in Season 2, and they just failed miserably. Oh well, at least the second time worked. Also, they give Ferb a hilariously stupid backstory as to why he doesn't play soccer anymore. I literally can't do it justice, so I'm just gonna play the clip.
What is that, night? Like, back it up to about the middle of the third quarter.
Phineas, soccer doesn't have quarters. Basketball has quarters. Soccer has the first half, second half, and overtime. And I thought you were a genius. Sorry about that, but that was dumb. Anyway, back to the clip.
Late in the second period.
You just said that it was the third quarter, you dumbass. I'm sorry, I'm being pedantic about this.
The other team had kicked the ball out of bounds, and Ferb grabbed it. Suddenly, from out of nowhere, a herd of emu ran onto the field and carried off our assistant coach.
Well, that's not the worst thing in the world. I mean, I heard one of them eventually went into insurance. And how do they break this curse?
To break the emu curse, a boy wearing a Sunday bonnet must sing the note E-flat above high C in front of the cursed one.
Yeah, sure, whatever. God, I fucking love this show. So if there's one thing I really appreciate about this episode is the ending. Yeah, they break the curse. And Ferb still misses the winning goal.
It missed the goal by a mile.
What happened? I guess the curse wasn't broken.
No, it's broken. Sometimes you just miss.
That's the most prophetic quote I've ever heard out of a cartoon, and I'm not really sure how much I'm joking yet. And it comes from the show about a secret agent platypus. Oh, speaking of Perry, so Doofenshmirtz is under the weather, or deficient in vitamins or something. Whatever, I don't care. So, for all intents and purposes, Perry the platypus is on his own today to stop Doofenshmirtz's evil plan. And what is that silly evil plan?
Generations, philosophers have asked, if a tree falls in the forest and no one is around to hear it, does it make a sound?
Oh my god, who the hell cares?
He seems to think we would, because here's how the rest of his plan goes.
One blast from this puppy will knock over a tree or anything else for that matter, and the sound it will make will be Doofenshmirtz.
Okay, but why though?
Hey, wait, where are they going?
I made him a crumpet. Oh, is that what that is?
Honey, if that's a crumpet, then I'm Black Panther. Oh, I should also mention, the reason why Ferb's cousins are in town in the first place is to watch their favorite football club, the Snifferton Nostrils.
Nostrils on the bus.
Sure, okay.
You're a brilliant footballer, an all-around good chap, and a Brit through and through.
Actually, lads, I'm not a Brit or a Yank.
No, he's a libertarian. Up next is Meepless in Seattle, the much-anticipated sequel episode to The Chronicles of Meep. Meep's nemesis is back. By the way, I don't know if I mentioned this in the Season 2 portion, but his nemesis's name is Mitch, or as he likes to call himself, Big Mitch, which could have easily been shortened to Bitch if this was an adult show. I mean, he is kind of a smarmy bitch, so it would fit. And now Phineas Ferb, Isabella, and a reluctant Candace all team up to help Meep save his own kind from eternal captivity. While this is going on, we follow up on two previously established plot lines in the Doof Perry story. The first is one that I actually didn't really talk about, so I'll do that now. In the Chronicles of Meep, Doofenshmirtz's backstory is related to a best friend that he had made when he was a child. A literal fucking balloon that he named Balloony.
I got a balloon at the carnival. I drew a face on him. I sprayed him with special lifelong lasting spray I created, and I named him Balloony.
First of all, how did you make that spray of yours at such a young age? Secondly, why did you draw that fugly-ass face? And his evil scheme for the episode is to utilize static electricity to draw the balloon back to him. Which, bizarrely, is actually one of the smartest plans he's ever come up with on the show. So, you're asking, how exactly does Balloony come back in this episode? Well, that's easy. It turns out he's a traitor.
Balloony, it's you!
Please don't ask me how a sentient balloon with no arms, legs, or limbs of any kind is able to control a battlesuit. I have no fucking idea. Like, even Power Rangers is laughing at this. Oh, and then spoilers! Balloony dies at the end. Except not really, because we've given the double middle finger to logic in this show. Just FYI, Doof, Balloony is not a replacement for therapy. So yes, Balloony is the first previously established plot point that this episode follows up on. The other is Peter the Panda. Yeah, remember It's About Time from Season 1 and how Peter the Panda basically replaced Perry the Platypus temporarily as Doofenshmirtz's new nemesis? Yeah, well apparently Doofenshmirtz wanted seconds, I guess. It's just funny to me because the logical thing would have been to have Peter the Panda appear in the second time travel episode, Quantum Boogaloo, back in Season 2. But like I said like 25 seconds ago, we've given the middle finger to logic. So he's here instead. And to be fair, he does stuff in this episode. He does contribute to the overall conclusion of the story. It's just hilarious because he feels more out of place in this episode than he did in his original episode. I have no idea how you do that. And then there's This Is Your Backstory. And while it's not one of the funniest episodes of the season, and certainly not one of my favorites, it is definitely the most interesting of the season. It basically takes the emotionally scarring backstory element of Doofenshmirtz's stories and flips it right on its head. Only Doofenshmirtz would think to take the negative energy that his emotionally scarring backstories produces and feed it to himself to transform into a ginormous monster that would help him take over the tri-state area somehow. While I appreciate just how funny the episode is on its own, I also appreciate the episode for helping reinforce how much I fucking hate Doofenshmirtz's parents and family at large. Yeah, I'm looping Roger into that because he's not blameless in all this, but holy shit, I didn't think it was possible for me to despise Mr. and Mrs. Doofenshmirtz any more than I already did, but this show succeeded! I want very terrible things to happen to these people. But you know, for as bad as Doofenshmirtz has it, it could always be a lot worse. After all, he has a best friend in Perry the Platypus, as evidenced by the fact that all of Doofenshmirtz's encounters with Perry are constituted as good memories, which ends up reversing the effects of the bad memories, which transforms Doofenshmirtz back to normal. That's right, Balloony. Perry the Platypus is Doofenshmirtz's best friend. You abandoned him, remember? You can get fucked. I mean, not really, I don't want you to be that happy. Although this is also one of the few episodes that doesn't prominently feature Phineas Ferb or any of their friends, or even Candace. Their subplot is relegated to them just playing ping pong. How exciting. Actually, I take that back. There is payoff in the end credits scene.
We did it! We've stored up enough kinetic energy. The quantum vortex should appear any second now.
And then the universe gets its neck snapped. Or at least that's the best way I can describe this. And now we come to the last two 22-minute episodes of the season. And for the first time in the show's history, we have a two-parter.
Fucking what?
Yeah, that's right. A two-parter instead of a 44-minute episode. Which to me is a distinction without a difference, but that's neither here nor there. So there's something really interesting about these two episodes that I want to point out before we talk about the episode proper. When this episode was first announced at San Diego Comic-Con in 2012, it was pitched as a season finale cliffhanger, with Part 1 ending Season 3 and Part 2 beginning Season 4. That's not actually what happened. The last episode of Season 3 to air was an episode called Blackout, in which the kids and Danville all, experience a blackout. I promise it's actually funnier than I make it sound. And the first episode of Season 4 was For Your Ice Only. So whatever the cause, Part 1 ending Season 3 and Part 2 beginning Season 4 did not come to fruition. It's not really a big deal and it doesn't affect anything, I just think it's funny that they marketed it that way and that ended up spectacularly not being the case. Then again, Phineas and Ferb really didn't follow the standard broadcast season time frame, if you will, as evidenced by Season 4 taking 3 years to finish airing all of its episodes, but I'll get to that next time. For now, we finish off Season 3 with Where's Perry Parts 1 and 2. Phineas Ferb and their friends are all headed to Africa to spend time with one of Lawrence's college friends, while Perry, after being called in for an assignment by Monogram that ends up turning into absolutely nothing, has to be left behind. Not for nothing, but this kind of bullshit justifies Perry asking for a raise. Actually, what this leads to is even funnier. So it turns out that the first scheme that Perry encounters was actually a fraud. See, Doofenshmirtz figured out that Perry would leave the second he was sure that he had foiled his evil scheme. Thus, the decoy evil plan to keep in the shadows the real evil plan. Like, the dude may be an idiot, but he really is not stupid. Anyway, his real evil scheme? To turn Major Monogram evil so that he will work for Doofenshmirtz and help him take over the entire tri-state area.
Of course!
But a slight mishap results in Carl being turned evil. And he goes full ham with the evil, and it is absolutely fucking delightful. Even the song he gets in this episode is fucking incredible.
Heard it here first, 'cause I'm the one who said it, 'cause I'm evil. He's evil! I'm evil for extra credit.
To this day, I have no idea what the fuck he's talking about. While that's going on, we have a couple of intersecting plots that go on with the kids. Candace gets a taste of what it was like before technology overtook all of our lives. Isabella has to challenge herself to earn a patch that requires her to eat grub, and Phineas and Ferb challenge themselves to build a highly unconventional vehicle to help themselves down a very steep and dangerous-looking gorge. While in general with the show, I find myself more invested with the kids and their stories just because I find them to be so damn endearing and likable, and I'm curious about what wacky adventures and insane contraptions they will build. When it comes to this particular two-parter, I found myself incredibly invested in the Alka story. See, Carl becoming evil, contextualized in the same episode with Monogram being kind of a sucky boss, adds an intriguing layer of depth to these characters that I didn't previously realize. And this will get explored a little bit more in part 2. Oh, that's right! We have a cliffhanger ending we need to talk about. The kids almost fall to their deaths in the gorge because Buford and Baljeet can't stop being petty lovers. Candace thinks Jeremy wants to break up with her thanks to shitty phone reception. Seriously, fuck that idea. And Perry is last seen being blasted by one of Doofenshmirtz's innators. But because he's hit with all of them at once, it's impossible to determine which one actually got him and what the outcome of that is. I will say, this show does know how to do a cliffhanger ending, and it's kind of a pity we didn't get more of them. And thus, we get part 2, the final 22-minute episode of the season. Doofenshmirtz and Monogram team up to stop Carl and turn him back to good. Candace abandons her human life and decides to live amongst the monkeys, and that's not a joke. And the kids all struggle to get their footing in the jungle again, while Phineas convinces himself that he spotted Perry somewhere in the jungle. By the way, he was right. It's established that Perry was hit with the go-hominator, which, in Doofenshmirtz's interpretation, is to go home to his family, which on the one hand is incredibly touching, but on the other hand, if that's not an ass-pull, I don't know what is. It's also bizarre to me because when you really think about it, Phineas was kind of being a little bit of a selfish dick here. He was the only one that saw Perry. For all he knew, he could have been dead wrong, and yet he insisted on dragging his friends and stepbrother all around the jungle just in the faint hope of finding Perry the Platypus. And it's unreasonable how pissed I am that this never really gets brought up again. And of course, Carl continues his trudge into evil by following Perry the Platypus to Africa with his army of evil Flynn Fletcher robots. Oh, I didn't mention that part, did I? So when I was a middle-aged robot, all the way back in Season 2, it's established that Carl not only has a robot version of Lawrence, but a robot version of literally every member of the immediate Flynn Fletcher family.
That's a little creepy, Carl.
Yes. Yes, it is.
And now he has more robots. Why? Because fuck you, that's why. Seriously, who would have thought that the guy that was introduced into the show as an unpaid intern, who started at Alka as whatever is classified as below an unpaid intern, would turn out to be the most competent villain of the entire series? Oh, but don't worry, as of this episode, the title of unpaid intern no longer applies to Carl. He's now a paid intern! It's just a worthless title and doesn't actually come with any money. For fuck's sake, Monogram, can you not be a cheap ass for 5 minutes? And yes, I am laying this directly at the feet of Monogram, thanks to a line that he utters earlier.
Carl always changes my radio stations when we fly together, so I had this jet built just for me. That's partly why our budget is so tight now.
Monogram, this is a legitimate question. How have you not broken every bone in your body falling down a flight of stairs yet? And of course, everything wraps up very nicely. Isabella gets her grub-eating patch after all. Candace and Jeremy don't actually break up, and everyone enjoys a nice, heartwarming reunion with Perry while conveniently ignoring the elephant in the room of how the hell he even got to Africa in the first place. You know, I remember thinking that this two-parter did a great job of conjuring up drama and upping the stakes. But what I didn't really remember was how fucking funny these 2 episodes were. It's in the one-liners and the dialogue exchanges.
You don't pay him?
He gets college credit.
Are you sure you're not evil?
18 hours with no phone.
We are in Africa.
Oh, stop panicking, Francis. I haven't even touched the main stabilizers. You know, yet. Just out of curiosity, does this thing have a lifeboat?
We're in a plane.
I knew that.
I think when push comes to shove, I probably wouldn't call Where's Perry Part 1 or Part 2 my favorite 22-minute episode of the series. Hell, I'm not even sure I'd call it my favorite of the season. But I definitely underrated it in the past. It does a great job of raising the stakes, shaking up the status quo a little bit, introducing new ideas and playing around with them a little bit, even though I really detested them flirting with the idea of breaking up Candace and Jeremy. And the jokes were still as fresh and as funny as ever. Season 3 was definitely the most ambitious season yet, what with all of these new ideas they tried out, the movie, but of course that's nothing compared to the ambition of Season 4, the final season of the original run. Come back next time and we'll discuss all of that, plus Candace Against the Universe, and in the meantime, look out for a quickie on Milo Murphy's Law, because that show and its context is going to be important into understanding where I'm coming from for the final part of this ginormous retrospective. I remember when this was just going to be one video quickly going over all of the seasons. Boy, how naive was I?